For 20 years, I believed I had it all: a loving husband, a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a marriage that people admired. They called us soulmates, envied how we held hands at dinner parties and laughed at each other, jokes like we were still teenagers. I believed in us, I believed in him, and then I found out. But before we get there, let me tell you who I was back then. My name is Claire. I met Ethan when I was 23, just out of college, bright-eyed and full of dreams. He was charming, older, successful, a man who made me feel safe in a world that often felt like it was spinning too fast. Within a year, we were married. It felt like fate. Everyone told me how lucky I was, how rare it was to find someone so devoted, so stable, so loving. Ethan made grand gestures, surprise weekend getaways, handwritten notes left on my pillow, and breakfasts in bed just because it was Tuesday. He was the perfect man, or so I thought. Our life unfolded like a fairy tale. We bought a house in the suburbs, planted trees together, raised 2 children who adored their father. He coached Little League. He made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He sang lullabies at bedtime. And I loved him more every day. Or maybe I loved the version of him he let me see. Because what I didn't know was that our life, this life I had built my entire identity around, was constructed on a lie. Not a small lie, not the kind you can brush under the rug or forgive in a moment of weakness. No. This was the kind of lie that reshapes your entire past, makes you question every smile, every kiss, every moment you once held sacred. It started with an old box. Funny, isn't it? How something so simple can shatter everything. We were cleaning out the attic one weekend, just a regular Saturday, the kind filled with casual banter and iced tea breaks. I found the box tucked behind an old suitcase, covered in dust and sealed with duct tape. Ethan looked startled when I pulled it out. "Just old college stuff," he said too quickly. "Nothing important." But that night, after he fell asleep, I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, faded paper, yellowed edges. Some were addressed to a woman named Rachel, others were from her to Ethan. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but I recognized the emotions in those letters: longing, pain, guilt, love. And one envelope in particular changed everything. It was dated just 3 months before our wedding. Inside, a letter written by Ethan. It read, "I wish I could choose you, but I can't walk away from the life I'm supposed to have now. She believes in me, and I can't break her heart. I hope you understand. I'll always love you, Rachel, but I have to marry Claire." That was the moment the air left my lungs. I stared at the words like they were in another language, refusing to let them make sense. I read the letter over and over, hoping I had misunderstood. But it was clear. He had been in love with someone else, still was maybe, and he married me, not out of love but out of obligation, maybe fear, maybe convenience. What does it do to a woman to realize her entire marriage was built on someone else's compromise? For the next few days, I said nothing. I watched him move around the house, pouring coffee, laughing with the kids, reading the newspaper like nothing had changed. But everything had. I had. Every touch felt colder. Every word sounded rehearsed. I began to replay every memory in my head like a crime scene. Our wedding day, our first night in our new home, the birth of our children. Were they all lies? Or was I just the fallback plan? I tried to convince myself that maybe he changed, that maybe he grew to love me, that maybe what we built was still real, but the truth has a way of rotting everything from the inside once it's been revealed. And now, every "I love you" echoed with suspicion. I finally confronted him a week later. We were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset like we had done so many times before. I handed him the letter. He didn't say a word for a long time, just stared at it, jaw clenched, his eyes unreadable. Then he said the one thing I'll never forget. "I thought you'd never find out." No apology, no explanation. Just that. "I thought you'd never find out. It told me everything I needed to know." It wasn't just a youthful mistake or a painful secret buried in the past. It was a calculated decision, a betrayal he had chosen to live with for 20 years. He went to bed that night. I didn't. I sat on that porch until the sun came up, watching the light change everything around me. The sky, the trees, the face I no longer recognized in the reflection of the glass door. I had lived a life crafted around a lie, and now I had to decide what to do with the truth. That was just the beginning, because if he had lied about that, what else had he kept from me? And worse, was I ready to find out? After reading the letter, a part of me wanted to scream. Another part just shut down. I didn't confront Ethan right away because I was afraid that once I started asking questions, the truth wouldn't stop, that it would unravel everything. So instead, I watched him closely. I observed him like a stranger in my own home. Every move he made, every smile he gave our children, every tender word, suddenly they all felt like performances. And yet, the worst part wasn't discovering the lie. It was realizing how good he was at lying. For 20 years, I believed Ethan was the best father I could have ever imagined for our kids. He never missed a soccer game. He taught them how to swim, how to ride a bike, how to look someone in the eye when speaking. He was gentle but firm, playful but wise. He tucked them in every night with a kiss and a story, even when he had deadlines, even when he was exhausted. He called our daughter Princess and our son Champ. Every weekend, he made pancakes and gave them ridiculous names like dinosaur discs or galaxy cakes. Our kids adored him. They worshipped him, and I had too. But now, I looked at him and wondered who he really was. What kind of man can be so loving to his children while hiding such a massive betrayal from their mother? Was the father I saw the same man who had chosen to build a life with me out of guilt? It started eating at me. I'd find myself staring at family photos, wondering what was real. There was one picture that particularly haunted me. It sat on the mantel above our fireplace. Ethan holding our newborn daughter in his arms, tears in his eyes. I used to love that photo. I used to tell people it was the most honest moment I'd ever seen in a man. Now I stared at it like a puzzle. Were those tears of joy or regret? I began searching for more, not just about Rachel, but about everything. I dug through drawers, searched his emails, opened every file on his laptop while he was at work. I told myself I was protecting myself, that I had a right to know the full truth after 20 years of living in the dark. That's when I found something else. An email thread, not with Rachel, with someone else, a woman named Vanessa. At first, I thought it was work-related. She signed her emails with a company name, but the tone, it was too familiar, too warm. There were inside jokes, references to dinners, to drinks like old times. One message sent just 6 months ago ended with, "I miss the way you used to look at me. Does she know you still dream about me?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Rachel was the lie that started everything, but Vanessa was the lie he was still living. I didn't know what to do. Our kids were still at school. The house was quiet. Ethan was at the office, probably sipping his 4th coffee of the day, blissfully unaware that the world he'd built on deception was beginning to burn. When he came home that night, I played along. I made dinner. I smiled when he kissed my cheek. But the entire time, my hands were shaking. I was looking at a man who had not just betrayed me once, but twice, maybe more. And yet, he laughed with our son about a math test, complimented our daughter's artwork, and offered to do the dishes without being asked. How could someone be such a monster to me and such a hero to our children? It's a question I still haven't answered. That night, I sat by our daughter's bedside while she slept. Her face was so peaceful, so untouched by the war raging in my mind. She loved her father. Both our kids did. And for all his lies to me, I couldn't deny this one brutal truth. He had been a good father. But now, that only made everything worse. because I realized something else. He hadn't just fooled me, he had fooled them too, and the day they found out, it would break their hearts. But maybe it was time they knew who he really was. The box was old, wooden, carved with faded initials that had once been elegant, but now looked worn and forgotten. When Helena first pulled it from the back of her late mother's closet, she hadn't thought much of it. The dust had triggered a sneeze, and the lock had already rusted halfway open. It was the kind of keepsake you found and barely gave a second thought to, until she opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all yellowed with age, their paper fragile and brittle to the touch. Her name was on several envelopes, not Helena in her mother's cursive, but her full name, printed neatly in block letters. Helena Dias. Some letters were sealed, others had been opened, read, and carefully tucked back into their envelopes like they were being hidden, not lost. What stopped her cold was the return address on many of them. C.E., Rua das Palmeiras, São Paulo. Her father's handwriting. But it couldn't be. Her father had died before she was born, or at least that's what she'd been told her entire life. There were no photos, no stories beyond a vague mention that he had passed away in an accident before her birth. Every time she'd asked her mother, she'd get a tight-lipped, "He was a complicated man," followed by an abrupt change of subject. It had hurt, but she had stopped asking years ago. Yet here were letters from a man who was supposed to have been gone long before any of them could have been written. She picked one, dated December 1994, and unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. "Helena, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I've sent so many of these letters, but your mother never replies. I'm not even sure if she gives them to you, but I need you to know I love you. I always have. I never wanted to leave. That was her choice, not mine. I would have raised you, protected you, watched you grow, but she shut me out. If you ever wonder why I wasn't there, it wasn't because I didn't want to be. I tried. I'm still trying. Love, Dad." The words blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't someone else's story she had stumbled upon. This was her life, a truth buried so deep it had taken 2 decades and her mother's death to unearth it. She pulled out another letter, February 1996. "Helena, I heard you turned 2 this week. I wasn't invited, of course. I don't even know where you live anymore. She's moved again. But I still write. I have to believe one day you'll read these, that you'll come looking. I keep copies of everything I send, just in case. I don't blame you. I never could, but I don't understand why she's doing this." Helena's hands shook. Her heart pounded. Her mind was spinning. Who was her mother, really? Everything had been a lie. The mourning, the single motherhood, the sense of loss she had carried all her life. It was all carefully crafted fiction. What her mother had mourned wasn't a dead man. It was a truth she had buried and kept hidden from Helena her entire life. The letters kept going. Birthday after birthday, year after year, each one full of longing, of absence, of pain, but also love. A deep, unwavering love from a man she never knew. One letter stood out. It was thicker than the others, written in 2005, the year Helena turned 11. "Helena, I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything. Courts, letters, calls. No one helps me. She says I'm dangerous, that I left, that I didn't want you. But that's not true. I was young, I made mistakes, but I loved you. I still do. If you ever see me, I hope you'll look into my eyes and know the truth. I hope you'll give me a chance." Her chest tightened. She had questions, so many questions, and the one person who could answer them was gone. Except, not necessarily. She looked again at the return address. Rua das Palmeiras. Her father hadn't been dead. He had been writing, waiting, hoping. Helena sat down on the floor, the box in her lap, and let herself cry for the first time in years, not because she missed her mother, but because of the betrayal, because her entire identity had been built on a lie. She had grieved a father who was alive. She had idolized a mother who had chosen to erase him. She didn't know what was worse, the lie itself or the fact that she'd never questioned it. Then she saw it, a final envelope marked, "To be opened on your 21st birthday." She stared at it for a long moment before slowly tearing it open. "Helena, I hope you're reading this because you found the others. I hope you know the truth by now. If not, here it is. I'm your father. I never left. I was pushed away. By the time you read this, I might be gone. But I never stopped loving you. If you want answers, come find me. If I'm still alive, I'll be in São Paulo. I never left the city. I stayed, in case you ever came." The final line felt like a punch to the stomach. "I stayed, in case you ever came." Helena stared at the wall, her mind spinning. 20 years. She had lived 20 years in the shadow of a lie, and now she would find out what else her mother had hidden, and what it would cost to uncover the full truth. She folded the letter gently and held it to her chest. Tomorrow she would begin the search. Tomorrow she would go to São Paulo. And if her father was still out there, alive and waiting, then someone else would have to pay the price for what was taken from them, starting with the man her mother trusted most. When Helena stepped into her godfather Alvaro's rustic kitchen, the scent of strong black coffee hit her like a memory. The walls, still painted the same warm ochre from her childhood, seemed to whisper secrets she had long buried. Alvaro was sitting at the wooden table, reading an old newspaper with his glasses perched on the tip of his nose. The second he saw her, his expression changed. He smiled. But it was the kind of smile that folded into unease a moment later. "Helena," he said, placing the paper down gently. "You came. I was beginning to wonder if you would." "I need to talk," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. She didn't sit down. He motioned toward the chair across from him, but she remained standing. "I need to know the truth," she said, "about my mother, about what happened back then." Alvaro sighed, reached for his cup, and took a long sip. "I hoped this day wouldn't come. But I suppose it always does, doesn't it?" Helena's hands clenched at her sides. "Don't give me riddles, please. I already know part of it. I know my father, Pedro, might not have been the man he claimed to be. I know there was another man, and I know you were close to both of them." The air in the room thickened. Alvaro leaned back in his chair and looked out the window, where the wind swayed the eucalyptus trees in the distance. "You're right," he said quietly. "There was another man." Helena felt her knees weaken, so she finally sat. "Who?" she whispered. Alvaro didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the trees as he spoke. "Your mother, Mariana. She was in love before she met Pedro, deeply. The kind of love people write songs about. His name was Victor." Helena blinked. That name meant nothing to her. "Victor?" she repeated. "Why have I never heard of him?" "Because Pedro made sure you wouldn't." The silence that followed was brutal. Alvaro turned to her now, finally meeting her eyes. "Victor was Pedro's younger brother." Helena gasped, her mind reeled. "You're saying my father's own brother?" Alvaro nodded. "Victor was wild, passionate, impulsive. Mariana loved him for it. But Pedro was always the protector, stable, charismatic in a quiet way. He was older. And when Victor left, suddenly without a word, Mariana was shattered. Left? Why? No one knew. Not at first. Then rumors began that Victor had been in some kind of trouble, that he'd gotten involved with a girl who turned out to be someone dangerous, someone connected to crime. He vanished. Helena felt the room spinning. And then Pedro stepped in. He was there to comfort Mariana. He helped her pick up the pieces, and not long after they got married. But if she loved Victor, why would she? She was pregnant, Helena. Helena's heart stopped. "With me?" she asked, her voice hollow. Alvaro didn't answer. He didn't need to. Tears welled up in her eyes. You're telling me Pedro married her to cover up his brother's mistake, that he raised me knowing I wasn't his? Alvaro nodded slowly. Pedro was many things, but above all else, he cared about appearances, about legacy. He couldn't allow a scandal like that to define him, so he claimed you as his own. And my mother? Did she go along with it willingly? Alvaro's jaw tightened. She didn't have a choice. She was alone, scared and ashamed. Her family had disowned her. Pedro offered her stability on his terms. Helena stood up, furious now. So my entire childhood was a performance, a lie. I tried to tell you years ago, Alvaro said gently, but Pedro made it clear, if I ever opened my mouth, I'd lose everything. And Victor? She asked. What happened to him? Alvaro hesitated. He came back, once, when you were 5. Helena's knees nearly buckled again. What? He saw you from a distance. He never approached. He watched you and Mariana through the fence one afternoon. He cried. Then he left, said he couldn't stay, that you deserved better than a man like him. Does he know? She asked, tears streaking her cheeks. Does he know I'm his daughter? Alvaro nodded. The room was spinning, yet everything also felt crystal clear. And Pedro kept that from me all this time. Let me believe he was my father. Let me mourn him as one. Let me defend him over and over. He thought he was protecting you, Alvaro said. No, she snapped. He was protecting himself. She walked toward the door but stopped. Do you know where Victor is now? Alvaro hesitated, then said, last I heard, he was in Lisbon, running a bookstore, alone. Helena didn't look back. She just walked out, each step heavier than the last. Back at her apartment, Helena sat alone, holding a small photo of her mother, the one she'd always kept by her bed. For the first time, the smile in the photo looked sad to her, tired. She picked up her phone and opened a blank message to Tomas. But she didn't type anything, not yet. Instead, she whispered to the room as if speaking to her mother's ghost. Did you love him until the end? Did you regret the lie? The silence that followed was suffocating. But then, beneath the silence, a new sound emerged, resolve. Helena would find Victor. She needed to look into his eyes and ask him the questions that had haunted her since Alvaro Cés' confession. She needed to know why he left, why he never came back. But more than anything, she needed to reclaim the truth of who she was. Because 20 years of lies didn't just break a person, they redefined them, and she wasn't going to let that happen again. The next morning, Helena woke up before sunrise. The world was silent except for the faint hum of wind brushing past her window. Her head throbbed from a restless night spent in spirals of thought, her dreams haunted by voices she couldn't identify and eyes she couldn't forget. Alvaro's words still echoed in her ears. Victor was your real father. Pedro knew. Your mother wanted to protect you. It wasn't just the content of the revelation that shook her. It was the years lost to a lie. She'd lived 2 decades believing she was the daughter of one man, when her truth had always lived in the shadows. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the same spot on the floor where she had dropped the envelope the night before. On impulse, she stood up and moved to her mother's old armoire, drawn by an energy she couldn't explain. From the top shelf, behind layers of fabric and forgotten perfume bottles, she pulled out a wooden box, the one her mother had always kept locked. Helena had never dared to open it before. Mariana had been fiercely private about it. But now, with the truth bursting inside her chest, that box became a vessel of potential understanding and judgment. Inside, beneath a pile of pressed flowers and photos of her as a baby, she found a stack of old letters tied together with a ribbon so faded it was almost colorless. Her fingers trembled as she undid the knot, the ribbon falling apart like an old secret finally giving up. Each envelope was worn, marked by time and tears, but they were unmistakably addressed in the same careful, slanted handwriting, "To my dearest Mariana." The first letter she opened smelled faintly of old ink and lavender. The pages were yellowed, but the ink was still bold. Lisbon, November 1999. My Mariana, I don't know if you'll read this or if Pedro will find it first, but I need you to know that leaving wasn't my choice. I was followed, watched, silenced. Pedro promised he'd protect you, that he'd raise the child as his. But I never agreed to disappear. I never agreed to be erased. If she ever asks where she comes from, please, tell her about me, about us. Yours always, Victor. Helena's heart pounded. Her fingers fumbled for another letter, desperate to find more. December 2001. Mariana, I saw you in the cafe today. You didn't see me, but you laughed. The kind of laugh that always made people turn their heads. She looks just like you. Her eyes, her hands, even the way she walks. I wish I could hold her just once. Does she know I exist? Or have you buried me beneath the safety of silence? I never stopped loving you. I never will. Helena's breath caught in her throat. For years, she had wondered why Pedro always seemed distant, as if there was something between them he could never fully bridge. Now she understood. She was a constant reminder of a lie he had agreed to perpetuate, a truth he helped cover up in the name of love or control. Then at the bottom of the stack, she found something unexpected. A single letter, untouched, in a different envelope. It had her name written on the front. To Helena, for when she is ready. She didn't hesitate. She tore it open. My sweet daughter, if you're reading this, then everything has changed. I wanted to hold you when you were born. I wanted to be there for your first steps, your first day of school, your first heartbreak, but I was erased before I could even whisper your name. None of this was your fault. I was not perfect. I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people, but my biggest regret was not fighting harder to stay near you. I hope you've lived a beautiful life. I hope you've laughed more than you've cried. And I hope that even in my absence you felt loved. If you want to find me, I still live where you were born. I never left. I waited. With all my heart. Victor. Helena dropped the letter to her lap. Her eyes welled with tears that finally spilled down her cheeks, quiet and unstoppable. For the first time, she wasn't crying for what she'd lost. She was crying for what she never had the chance to know. She glanced back at the envelope. The postmark was recent, less than a year old. Her breath caught. He was still alive. She opened her laptop and searched his name with shaking fingers. It took less than 30 seconds. Victor R. Ferreira, owner, Esperanza Bookstore, Lisbon. The store still existed. There were photos. A small shop nestled between cobblestone alleys, lined with ivy and sunlight. And in one of the pictures, grainy from a customer review, was a man with silver-streaked hair and sad, kind eyes. Her father. She didn't hesitate. She booked a flight. The past wasn't just a ghost anymore, it was alive, waiting, and Helena, she wasn't afraid of the truth anymore. She was ready to walk toward it. Helena had always imagined what her real father might be like. In her childhood, when Pedro had seemed distant or cold, she would retreat into her own daydreams, constructing a man who read bedtime stories with passion, who laughed at her silly jokes, who knew instinctively when something was wrong. Her imagination had painted him 1,000 different ways over the years. A musician, a traveler, a teacher, even a secret agent once. But never had she imagined him as a quiet bookstore owner, waiting patiently in the city where she was born. The plane touched down in Lisbon just after sunrise. The orange morning light stretched across the sky, casting long shadows over the tiled rooftops of the ancient city. As she stepped out of the airport, a rush of memories, not her own, but imagined, inherited, washed over her. She tried to picture Mariana, young and pregnant, walking these same streets. She tried to imagine Victor, unaware that his daughter had returned to find him. The taxi ride felt longer than it was. Every red light tightened the knot in her chest. Her palms were slick with sweat. The letter from Victor was tucked inside her purse, folded and unfolded so many times it was starting to tear at the edges. The driver pulled up to a narrow street that sloped downward toward the ocean. Nestled between a faded yellow building and a small cafe was Esperanza Bookstore. The sign was carved in wood and painted with delicate white script. There were flowers in pots outside the door, lavender, like the scent that clung to Victor's old letters. She stood outside for a moment, heart racing, hands frozen. Through the glass, she could see rows of tall wooden bookshelves, a spiral staircase that led to a loft, and at the register, him, Victor. He was older than the man in her imagination. His hair was mostly grey now, and his back curved slightly as he leaned over the counter reading something. But his face, his eyes, those were the same ones from the photograph. Kind, intelligent, tired, as if he'd spent a lifetime waiting. Helena opened the door. A bell jingled. Victor looked up, startled. His eyes lingered on her face, and something in them shifted. His mouth parted, as if to say something, but no words came. "Hi," Helena said, barely above a whisper. There was a long silence. The weight of 2 decades hung in the air. I'm Helena." She saw it happen in real time, the recognition, the disbelief, the cautious hope breaking into undeniable realization. He dropped the book. You came," he said, his voice cracking. "You came." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Victor rounded the counter slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. He stopped a few feet away. "May I?" He gestured, unsure. Helena stepped forward. He opened his arms, she stepped into them, and suddenly 20 years collapsed into a single moment. She felt like a child again, cradled not in memory, but in truth. His embrace was tentative at first, trembling with restraint, but then it deepened. Warm, real, heartbreakingly genuine. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Eventually, they sat down in the small reading nook near the front window. Victor poured tea from a chipped ceramic pot and handed her a cup. His hands were shaking. "I never thought I'd see you," he said. "Not really, I hoped. But I didn't allow myself to believe." "Why didn't you try harder?" she asked gently. "To find me." He exhaled. "I did, for years. Your mother wrote me once, one final time. She said Pedro wouldn't let me near you, that you were better off, and that if I loved you, I'd let go." Helena looked down at her tea. "And you did?" "I didn't want to," he said, "but I was young and scared, and Pedro had more power than I did. He had the law on his side, the name, the money. I was just the mistake that had to be erased." She shook her head. "You weren't a mistake. I was to them." They sat in silence again. A different kind this time, not one of distance, but of processing, of healing. "Did you ever marry?" she asked. Victor laughed softly. "No. No one ever compared to your mother, even when she broke my heart. Do you still love her?" He paused, then nodded. "A part of me always will, but the part that hurt, I let that go a long time ago." Helena sipped her tea. "I feel like I don't know who I am anymore." "You're Helena," he said without hesitation. "You're strong. You're brave. You're the kind of person who books a flight across the ocean to face the truth. That tells me everything I need to know." Her eyes filled with tears again, not from sadness, but from relief. She spent the whole day at the bookstore. Victor showed her the upstairs loft where he lived, the tiny kitchen with cracked tiles, the walls covered in old photographs and scribbled notes. There was a photo of her too, a school portrait from years ago. She hadn't known how he got it. She didn't ask. It didn't matter. He'd kept it close all this time. That night, she stayed in the small guest room behind the shop. Victor brought her extra blankets and a cup of chamomile tea. Before he left her to sleep, he stood in the doorway, hesitant again. "Would it be too much?" he asked. "If I said goodnight the way I used to dream I could?" Helena smiled through her tears. "Please." He stepped inside, kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Good night, my girl." The light clicked off, and for the first time in her life, Helena fell asleep, knowing exactly who she was. The peace Helena found in Lisbon didn't last long. She had barely spent 3 days reconnecting with Victor, sharing stories, asking painful questions, looking through old letters and photographs, when her phone rang one morning with a number she hadn't seen in weeks. Pedro. Her heart stopped. She stared at the screen for a long time before answering. "Helena," he said, sharp, clipped, not her name but a weapon. "Hi," she replied, calm and firm. "Where are you?" he demanded. She didn't answer. "I know you're not at home. Mariana said you left town. I just got back and—" He stopped himself. "Are you with him?" "Do you mean Victor?" she asked, making sure to use his name, to speak it out loud and unafraid. There was silence on the line. Then, "You ungrateful little girl," he hissed. And just like that, all the years of simmering control, guilt and disguised manipulation surfaced. The voice she had once trusted implicitly now sounded like a stranger's. Cold, calculating. Wounded, yes, but not from loss, from the loss of control. "You lied to me," she said, her tone steady. "You stole my father. You told me he abandoned me. I raised you," he spat. "I fed you. I gave you my name. I gave you everything." "No," she said. "You gave me a version of yourself. You never gave me the truth." Pedro's voice lowered to a threat. "You don't know what you're doing. You don't know who he is." Helena clenched her jaw. "I'm finding out. He's a manipulator, a coward. He didn't fight for you because he didn't want you, Helena. I protected you from him. I protected you from disappointment." "You protected yourself," she snapped. "You didn't want to share me. You wanted to own me." The line went dead. Her hands were trembling, but she felt stronger than ever. Victor had been in the kitchen preparing toast. When he saw her face, he paused. "Pedro called," she said. He didn't ask what was said. He just nodded. Later that day, a black car pulled up outside the bookstore. Pedro stepped out, wearing a tailored suit and sunglasses, despite the cloudy sky. His presence was like a cold wind sweeping through a warm room. He didn't knock. He walked straight in. Victor stood behind the counter, calm, collected. Helena was by the staircase, watching. "Pedro," Victor said evenly. "I see this place hasn't changed." Pedro sneered, glancing around. "Still small, still pathetic." "I could say the same," Victor replied. Pedro looked at Helena. "I came to take you home." "I am home," she said quietly. His eyes flashed. "Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built." "We didn't build anything," she said. "You built walls around me and called it love." Victor remained silent, letting her speak for herself. Pedro turned his fury on him. "You think this makes you a father? A few teacups and dusty books? She's mine. I raised her." Victor stepped forward. "You raised her under false pretenses. You erased me from her life. That's not love. That's control." Pedro's hands curled into fists. "You gave up your right the day you didn't fight harder." Victor didn't flinch. "You had power, I didn't. Money, influence, lawyers. She was a child. I didn't want her dragged through a war she didn't understand." Pedro scoffed. "So noble, so weak." Helena stepped between them. "You both hurt me," she said. "One with silence, the other with lies, but only one of you is still doing it." Pedro's face turned red. "I gave you a life," he barked. "No," she said. "You gave me a story, but I'm writing the rest myself now." Pedro's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in her life, she saw something new in him. Not rage, not pride. Fear. Fear that she no longer needed him. He turned to leave. At the door, he stopped and said, "If you walk away from me, don't expect anything from my estate, from my business, from me." Helena didn't hesitate. "I never wanted your money, just the truth, and now I have it." He left without another word. The silence that followed was thick with grief and relief. Victor sat down on the old armchair in the corner and let out a long, shaky breath. "I never wanted to steal you from him," he said. "You didn't," Helena replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You gave me back to myself." That evening they walked along the waterfront together. The sea breeze was cool and the sky was streaked with violet and gold. Helena felt lighter, even as sorrow lingered in her chest. She'd confronted the man who raised her and exposed the web of lies she'd grown up in. She had no idea what the future held, what relationships could be rebuilt or which ones were lost forever. But she had reclaimed her voice, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. For all the answers Helena had uncovered, there was still one voice missing from the chorus of truths, her mother's. Lucia had passed away 10 years prior, taken suddenly by a stroke. Helena remembered the funeral vividly, not just the grief, but the strangeness of it. Her mother had always seemed distant, distracted. She was kind, yes, and dutiful. But something in her gaze was always far away, as if a part of her lived in a different time. Back then, Helena had written it off as weariness. Life with Pedro was not easy. He was ambitious, demanding, controlling behind closed doors. Helena had seen it in small ways, how Lucia would bite her tongue during dinner, how she never spoke when Pedro was angry, how her smile always seemed a little too practiced. But now, everything looked different through the lens of truth. Had her mother known? Had she agreed to the lie? Helena couldn't let the question go. She searched through old letters, photos, and recordings, looking for anything that might offer a clue. Days passed. Victor helped where he could, but most of the search was solitary. One morning, in a box buried at the back of an old cedar chest, she found it, a journal. Worn, with a faded blue cover and a dried flower tucked between its pages. Her mother's handwriting was unmistakable. She hesitated before opening it. The first pages were ordinary, notes about shopping lists, garden ideas, and birthday plans. Then, about 20 pages in, the tone shifted. Helena sat on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding as she read. "Pedro said we shouldn't tell her. He insists that Victor was weak, that he didn't deserve to be part of her life. But every time I look at her, I see him. Her eyes, her quiet way of thinking before she speaks. It's all Victor. I dreamt last night that she was grown and I told her everything. In the dream, she hugged me. In real life, I'm not so sure she would. But I know this. A lie like this lives in the walls. It echoes. One day she'll hear it. And when she does, I pray she forgives me." Helena's hands were trembling. She kept reading. "Pedro was kind at first. But once he had her, once the court said she was ours, he became possessive. He loved her, I believe that. But it wasn't the kind of love a child needs. It was control. And me? I was a coward. I let him silence me. I told myself it was for her own good, that this way she'd have a stable life, a powerful name, a future. But now, every time she smiles at him like he's her hero, I feel like I'm dying inside." Helena wiped her eyes. Her breath came shallow and quick. There were more pages, dozens more. Some were tender, full of regret. Others were raw confessions of how isolated her mother had felt, how deeply she loved Helena, and how paralyzed she had been between the man she married and the man she had loved. Because it was clear now. Lucia had loved Victor. The journal revealed it slowly over time, moments from their youth, a friendship that blossomed into something deeper, kept secret in the early days. Then a pregnancy. Then Pedro, who swept in when Victor's family refused to support him. Victor had tried, he had fought. But Pedro, with his connections and wealth, had won the legal battle. He'd also won Lucia. partly through pressure, partly through fear. Helena felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. All this time, she'd been the product of a war no one ever told her happened, and her mother had lived with the guilt for the rest of her life. Helena closed the journal gently and held it to her chest. Her tears were quiet, steady. This wasn't the vindication she'd expected. It was something more painful, more human. Her mother hadn't been just a silent accomplice. She had been a prisoner too. That evening she shared the journal with Victor. He read it without speaking, his eyes glassy. "She loved you," Helena said. He nodded. "I never stopped loving her. And she wanted to tell me. She just didn't know how." He placed the journal down, gently, like a sacred artifact. "You're the bridge, Helena," he said softly, "between who she was and who she wanted to be. She didn't get the chance to fix it, but you do." Helena nodded, overwhelmed. In the following days, she visited her mother's grave for the first time since returning to Lisbon. She brought fresh flowers, the journal, and a heart full of words. She sat on the stone bench beside the headstone and whispered everything. "I understand now," she said. "I was so angry at you. For not standing up to him, for letting me believe something that wasn't true. But now I see you weren't weak. You were just scared and stuck, like I was." The breeze rustled the leaves above her. "I forgive you," she whispered. And as she said it, a weight lifted. Back at the bookstore, Victor had tea waiting. They sat in silence, reading through the journal together again, this time not in search of secrets, but in recognition of a woman they both loved, who had done the best she could with a fractured heart. Helena knew her journey wasn't over. There was more to confront, more wounds to tend to. But now she carried not just anger, but understanding, and a growing belief that healing wasn't just possible. It had already begun. There's a particular kind of silence that follows revelation, not the absence of sound, but a stillness in the soul, the moment when grief, fury, and truth exist all at once, suspended, suffocating. Helena lived in that silence for weeks. Victor had given her the space she needed, always present but never overbearing. The journal of her mother was now kept in her nightstand, under a linen handkerchief, like a relic. Each time she touched it, she was reminded of pain, but also of resilience. But the silence couldn't last. Pedro still lived in the same house, still carried the same name, still held power in the community. And though he had sensed Helena's distance, he hadn't truly understood the storm that was building. She hadn't told him what she knew. Yet, she needed him to feel it first. She needed him to lose everything. And so began the unraveling. It started quietly. Helena returned to her old firm, not as a subordinate this time, but as an equal. She used connections Pedro didn't know she had, allies she had made in London, and started a quiet but steady withdrawal of her name from anything tied to his fortune. No shared accounts, no inherited properties, no foundations with joint purpose. Then she reopened a cold civil petition, her birth records. Most people assumed these things couldn't be changed. But Helena knew better, especially when you had physical proof, witnesses, and an ethical judge with a reputation for fighting institutional manipulation. Victor, for the first time in 20 years, was listed on the documents as her biological father. Pedro was removed. She didn't announce it. She mailed it to his office. Pedro's assistant found the envelope first, wide-eyed, and placed it on his desk. Inside, 2 pages. One from the court stamped and signed, and one, a handwritten note. "You had 20 years to tell the truth. Now the world will know what you buried, and who you really are." He read it 5 times before he could move. Then he stood and screamed. Helena knew revenge wouldn't erase the years he stole, or the identity he twisted into something unrecognizable. But it would reveal him. Publicly. She contacted a journalist, not a tabloid reporter, but someone with integrity, someone who had once written about the failures of the family court system in Portugal. She shared the documents, the audio recording from Victor's previous case, even excerpts from her mother's journal. It became a feature. Power, Paternity and Silence, the woman who reclaimed her truth. 20 years later. It went viral. Pedro was furious. He called her 27 times in 2 days. She didn't answer once. He even showed up at her apartment, uninvited. She didn't open the door. She didn't have to, because the next blow was already in motion. The university board, where Pedro sat as a major donor, suspended his honorary title pending investigation. The charity he had co-founded quietly removed his name from their press releases. Business partners began to back away. Even former friends stopped answering his calls. But the worst part for him wasn't public, it was private. Helena met him one last time, by choice, in person, at a cafe near the harbor where he used to take her as a child. She sat down across from him. He looked hollow, older than she remembered, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice low, trembling. "I raised you." She didn't blink. "No, you controlled me. You raised a version of me that was convenient for your pride." Pedro opened his mouth, but she continued. "You lied. You stole me. You manipulated my mother. And when she died, you let me stand at her funeral with no idea of the sacrifice she made." He flinched. "I loved you," he whispered. "I still do." Helena leaned forward, voice like steel. "Then you should have loved me enough to tell the truth." He looked away. A long, bitter silence passed. Finally, he said, "I regret nothing but losing you." Helena stood. "That's the only thing you had to lose." And she walked away. Revenge is rarely as satisfying as the movies make it seem. It doesn't come with triumphant music or dramatic applause. It comes with silence and breathing and the slow return of self. In the days that followed, Helena kept moving. Her name spread, yes, but she wasn't chasing headlines. She was chasing peace. She worked with a lawyer to help others in similar battles, children caught in lies, women silenced by power. Victor began teaching again, small lectures, storytelling workshops. They'd have dinner twice a week, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable quiet. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Victor said, "You did what I never could. You reclaimed your name." Helena looked at him. "We reclaimed it." And she meant it. But one thing still lingered, one thread she hadn't pulled, one person whose silence had confused her more than anyone else. Her grandmother, Pedro's mother. She hadn't said a word since the truth came out. No calls, no letters, just silence. Helena wasn't sure if it was shame or something else. And so, with most of her truth spoken, most of her vengeance complete, she decided to find out, because maybe, just maybe, there was still one more secret left to uncover, and it was waiting behind a door she hadn't dared knock on until now. Helena stood outside the aging brick house, the one place she had avoided since the truth shattered her life. Pedro's mother's home, the fortress of silence and secrets. The sky was heavy with grey clouds, mirroring the weight in her chest. The envelope with her invitation trembled in her hand. She had written a letter, one last attempt at understanding, at closure. Taking a deep breath, she rang the doorbell. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a woman older than Helena remembered. Frailer, with eyes that held decades of sorrow and regret. "Helena," she whispered, voice cracking. "I never thought you'd come." "I had to," Helena said softly. "There are things I need to understand, things only you can tell me." The woman nodded slowly, then stepped aside, letting her in. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and lavender, a strange comfort. They sat in the living room, the walls lined with faded family photos, many of which Helena had never seen before. For a long time, they sat in silence, neither wanting to speak the first words. Finally, Pedro's mother began. "I was the one who told your mother to keep the secret." Helena's breath caught. "Why?" she asked, voice trembling. "She was young, vulnerable. Pedro was desperate, afraid of losing everything. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping quiet. But I see now I was only protecting myself from shame, from the truth, from the consequences." Tears welled in Helena's eyes. "Did you ever regret it?" The old woman nodded. "Every day. I watched you grow up without the love you deserved. I saw the pain in your mother's eyes, and I said nothing. I was a coward." Helena felt a mix of anger and pity swell inside her. "But you can't change the past." "No," the woman whispered, "but I can try to make things right now." Over the next few hours, she told Helena things she had never known. Stories of her mother's youth, of struggles with Pedro, of quiet sacrifices made to protect the family name. There was no excuse for the lies, no way to erase the damage. But there was something else, something raw and human beneath it all. Regret, remorse, a desire to heal. Helena left that house with more questions, but also with a strange sense of peace. She realized that truth wasn't just about exposing lies, it was about facing them, about forgiving, not for the other person, but for herself. Back in her own home, she opened the journal her mother had left her once more. A new passage caught her eye, one she had missed before. "In the end, we're all just trying to love and be loved, even when we fail." Helena closed the book and smiled through tears. Her journey wasn't over, not yet, but for the first time in 20 years, she felt whole, because she had reclaimed her story, her name, her life, and no one could ever take that from her. The end. Conclusão com CTA para o roteiro. Helena's story is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how painful, holds the key to healing and freedom. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves, to forgive, to accept, and to move forward. Her journey shows us that even after decades of silence and betrayal, there is hope for redemption and peace. If you found Helena's story touching or inspiring, please like this video, subscribe for more emotional storytelling, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever uncovered a family secret that changed everything? We want to hear your story. Remember, every story matters, and here at Betrayal and Forgiveness, we bring those stories to life.